I hope more people join us as we go along. I don't know, I can't see how many people we have now, but
we have 22 attendees now, so
22?
yeah, we have 22, so
Great.
I think it's a good number to start with.
It's a good time to start. Okay, well, good morning, everyone, and well, good afternoon and evening in your different locations. Thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to a very exciting conversation, and I hope that you join us as we, try to interact with you, try to get you to give us some insights about your experiences during this COVID-19 pandemic. So my name is Lola Adekanye. I'm the Business Integrity Lead at the Center for International Private Enterprise. I'm excited to be doing this in collaboration with Rainbow Consults in Ghana, and our co-presenter today will be Baaba Jackson. Baaba is a partner at Rainbow Consult, and Rainbow Consult is a consulting firm in Accra, and they're a partner, a licensed partner of the Center for International Private Enterprise, and they lead the business integrity projects and programs in Ghana with CIPE. So today, Rainbow and CIPE would like to spend some time, about an hour, 30 minutes, to provide very useful insights about survival during the current COVID-19 pandemic. It's hitting all of us really hard, especially small businesses. And the interesting thing is, although the impact varies from country to country and the response varies from country to country and even from business to business, there's no telling, there's no way to predict what the future holds. It's difficult to anticipate when this will be over, how quickly it will be over, what would happen when it's over. And so it's important for us to start getting, on board with how to respond quickly, how to adapt, and how to build resilience and prepare for recovery. So I'll just jump right into it. The objective for this 2-day webinar, so today we'll spend an hour, 30 minutes giving you a lot of insights about how we've articulated that responding and adapting and building resilience should flow, what the roadmap should be for small and mid-sized enterprises. There's a lot of information out there for large businesses, for organizations, for institutions, for governments, but there's not enough out there for small and mid-sized enterprises. And that's why we're really excited about bringing some of these things to the fore for SMEs. In addition to, today's webinar, we will have a webinar tomorrow, which is really an open panel discussion. So today's session is closed to only participants right now, and you will also have materials which you can take back and use and implement in managing your businesses to be able to cope with the current crisis. And so we have those resources for you that are prepared specifically for participants who attend today. Tomorrow's session will be broadcast live. It will be open to more people, and that will be a panel discussion with 5 excellent speakers who are also small business owners in about 5 countries. We have representatives from Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, and Ghana. And they'll be talking about how they've adapted or how they are continuing to adapt, and more, giving more examples about their experience based on a lot of the things that we'll be talking about today. So very quickly, the objective for today and for tomorrow is to help you as a small business owner, you as a co-founder of a small business, is to help you learn and know how to take steps from right now to adapt to the current situation. And of course, we'll talk about what the implication of the current situation is, and also help you to prepare for recovery. And this would all be practical. We'll be sharing practical advice and tips with you all. Would also help you get ready to implement a strategic plan for repositioning your business and building resilience to shocks like this that we are now learning can happen more often, and we'll talk about why we think so. And then finally, would help you get some insights about how to analyze or maybe reevaluate your business opportunities and your challenges in order to plan for smooth recovery post-pandemic or towards the end of this pandemic. Hopefully it's soon. So our agenda would follow these 3, keeping it quite simple, sweet, and short. and straight to the point, we will start with talking about the global and regional impact and outlook. The impact, from a global level on governments, and then on the economies, and then on your business. And then we'll talk about how to respond and how to adapt to the impact, and then how to also build resilience, how to make sure that you're ready if there is another shock like this, or even if there is no shock like this on a global scale or a regional scale, if it's to your business. And then finally, we will start to talk about planning for recovery and doing it with a very critical value, core value, which is integrity. And then we'll open up for some questions and answers. Of course, in between, we would, stop to, ask you questions and have you give us some feedback as we go along. My colleagues on the call, Laura and Michael, you can't see them, but they will be here to assist you. If you have any problems logging in or audio, or you want to raise your hands or ask a question, or put something in the chat. I think we only have the question and answer function open. There's no chat function, which is good because you can ask questions and get them answered and track that they've been answered. So Laura and Michael are right here, and they'll be available to assist as we go along. So just to talk about the global, global and the regional impact of COVID-19. This is a chart as of May, 11th of May. This is where things start. And of course, this number has gone up a little bit in terms of the cases of infection cases. Most countries, at least Ghana, is at like just under 3% infection rate. The only country in Africa that had not had an infection at all until yesterday now has one case reported, and that's Lesotho. And Lesotho is even, anticipating that there will be more cases. So there is the continuous spread of the virus across the region and globally. And all countries are struggling to adapt to this, including African countries. We know that the infection, as reported, the infection rate is low, but we already are seeing very, very, dire economic impact across Africa. The interesting thing about, the impact of risks that happen globally is that just towards the tail end of this, before the pandemic started, the World Economic Forum met and talked about global interconnectedness. And the idea was, with how much the world is connected, there is great opportunity for even small businesses to interact and to sell and to trade, but there are also risks. And this is one of the risks that we've seen with this pandemic, where something happened in one county in China, and this is having tremendous impact on us across the world, including right here in, Lekki, Lagos, where I am, or in, Accra, Ghana, or Mombasa, Kenya, where you are. And so, when we talk about reevaluating our opportunities and challenges, those are the things that we will be talking about. And so, to talk about the economic impact. So, right as we know that the infection rate is not as high as in some countries, we already are seeing terrible, terrible projections for our economies in Africa. You would see that, and so this chart basically shows that on average, we expected that, the sub-Saharan African GDP growth rate would be around 3.9, thereabouts. The African Development Bank projected this at the beginning of 2020, before we knew about COVID-19. Well, fast forward to now that COVID-19 is taking a hit and just traveling everywhere and has reached Africa, the projection has changed so much to, in the minus. It's dropped to minus 1.6. This is on average. This is the average. Some countries are worse off, some countries are better. And what this chart shows is where countries are based on this projection. Now, this is at a government, this is at a macroeconomic level, and that macroeconomic shocks hit our businesses hard, especially the small businesses. And so just looking at Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, you would see that in red, the projection for 2020 is right here. Now, I'm glad to see that, there is an anticipation that things will go up again in 2021, but for right now, we need to figure out how to survive. And right here, Ghana is right above, the average, the regional average for sub-Saharan Africa. But the numbers still look really bad, because even though Ghana is above the average, Ghana's projected growth this year was quite great. It was about 6.8%. But since COVID-19, it's dropped. It's dropped to about 1.49%. And that's the projection. Nigeria has dipped quite, dramatically to about minus 3.41%. And you will know that Nigeria is a very oil dependent. Nigeria's GDP is dependent highly on oil exports. And so with all the volatility in the oil market, Nigeria is facing, a big recession. South Africa also did not have very glowing projections before the pandemic. It was just under 1%, but right now it's dropped to minus 5.8. Same with Kenya. Kenya is now at 1.01, but they had over 3% growth rate projections. Now, the implication for our businesses and the implication in terms of, the closer impact on how businesses operate is this. The African Union was already projecting that more than half of the jobs in Africa will be lost after this pandemic. Hopefully that doesn't happen given all the government interventions, but that's the current projection. The ILO is already projecting 195 million jobs will be lost. In Ghana, KPMG was reporting that, in the hospitality industry, they're already seeing less than 30% occupancy rate in the hotels. That includes people buying foods or buying other kinds of services. That's the same case also in Kenya in the hospitality space. Highly tourist-driven economies are struggling with that. Kenya's the Association of Suppliers in the flowers industry, which is a big industry in Kenya, is also reporting that they lost about $83 million in March alone from the restrictions on movements and all of that. And this is the impact in all these different countries. South Africa's businesses, of about 315 businesses that were polled, almost 40% of them are now already pulling on government relief funds. And so, and of course on, trying to defer taxes and things like that. So we are already seeing dramatic impact of COVID-19 on our economies, and it's going to be affecting our businesses, or it's already affecting our businesses dramatically. When we face challenges like this is a chart, a chart with 4 quadrants that McKinsey and company put together that I think does something great for us, because it now helps us say, okay, what can we do right now, and what do we anticipate would happen going forward? This chart shows us what would happen in Africa if we can contain the spread of the virus. We are hoping that this low infection rates means that we are working to contain the spread of the virus, but that's only hope for now, because we're still, grappling with things like access to testing. We wonder if there's enough testing or, test kits. We are worried about whether the information in some countries, whether the information we're getting is accurate and true. So in terms of containment, we don't know yet if Africa is going to be able to contain the virus. Now that some countries are easing the lockdown restrictions, Nigeria is doing that. Markets are opening one day on, one day off. Businesses are advised to staff up to 50 or 60%. Now that they're easing these restrictions and there will be more or less social distancing, we don't know if we're moving on to a widespread again, not again, but a widespread. So globally, some countries did well to contain the virus. So South Korea, for instance, it was lauded for containing the virus, but only a few days ago, or 2 or 3 days ago, as they had been easing off restrictions and got to the point where they announced that bars and restaurants can open, just the night before they pulled that back because they saw a spike again, an outbreak. Same thing in Wuhan, where this virus started from in China. They saw an outbreak in about 6-7 places just as they were easing restrictions off. And they now have ordered 300 million tests in 5 days and, are being drastic again about going back to containing the virus. So globally, where there's already a widespread of the virus, the question is, how quickly can they contain it? And would there be a resurgence of the spread? Now, this quadrant, what this quadrant shows us is what will happen in Africa and what would happen globally if, to the left side, best case scenario quadrant number 1, if the virus is contained. And this is both on a health and economic level. Best case scenario for the world and for Africa is if we can contain the virus, and that's what happens in this quadrant number 1. Quadrant number 2 shows us if Africa contains the virus, but if there is a resurgence, a spread again of the virus globally. And then quadrant number 3 also shows if Africa contains the virus, if Africa has a widespread of the virus, but it's contained globally. And quadrant number 4 shows worst case scenario for both Africa and global and the global implications. Now, I will not bore you too much with the characters in here, but basically what I take away from this quadrant is, in the best case scenario for Africa and the world, here, number 1, best case scenario, when I read the implications, the economic, and this is what the economic experts are telling us, it says most countries experiencing isolated cases or small clusters of outbreaks, most countries will experience isolated cases or small clusters of outbreaks, but we will carefully manage restrictions and there's no widespread outbreak. And most economic impacts are driven through global knock-on effects on trade and travel. So this is in the best case scenario. So basically in the best case scenario, we can still anticipate challenges to travel, which impact on labor mobility, your employees being able to go about, get to work, deliver goods, collect goods, you being able to ship your goods and clear them. There will be those challenges still. And then there'll be knock-on effects on that in terms of the economy. So the question, so right now we have COVID-19, bear with me, I'm jumping the gun. So we have during the COVID-19 reality right now, we have these challenges that businesses are already facing. And they also have a direct link or impact on the ethics and integrity mindset for business owners and for employees. And Baaba will talk more about this slide when we start to talk about responding and adapting. But this just gives you an idea of, what we understand you might be experiencing now. And we will poll you about, we would like to ask you about what you're experiencing shortly. If there is a poll here, please let me know. I think there might be a poll around here. But basically, right now, with the restrictions, we had lockdown for about 5 weeks in Nigeria. Ghana had about lockdown for that long as well. South Africa did, Kenya. Many countries had lockdown. As a result, a lot of us are working from our living rooms, bedrooms, from working from home. Some of us are not working at all. Some industries, you just can't work from home for some industries. And so you're having employees working outside, the regular business premises, which poses its own challenges that we will talk in more detail about. And then you have economic insecurities arising from, you have debts that you have to service to banks, you have purchase orders that you have to fill, you have supply chain disruptions, so you can't access raw material, you also can't export your goods. The cash flow crunch also is affecting businesses, and then there are travel restrictions that impact how well you can go and have meetings and all that. And these come with its own challenges. And so right now the question is, how do you adapt? As a result of all of these challenges, governments in different countries are putting in different kinds of interventions, which is good, which is important for us to keep track of. And we will talk about this in more detail shortly. So there's a poll right now that, it's a question for you. You can hit with your mouse, you can hit one of the answers, and it says, have you made any adjustments to respond and adapt to the current situation? And this slide kind of summarizes the current situation that most businesses are facing. It'll be interesting to know if there's any more that you would want to share with us, which you can put in the Q&A. But right now, the question is, have you articulated a response for your business on how to adapt to these? And if you have, please hit yes. If you haven't, please hit no, and that's why we are here. If you're working on it, excellent reason to be here too. In fact, if you're here, you're more likely working on it, right? But if you're working on it actively, please hit working on it. And once you're done with the poll, we can display it for everyone to see. We have about almost 50 people on the call, so you can see where everyone is. And frankly, we are all adapting and we are all adjusting. So even if you haven't started working on it, even better that you're here. So please hit the poll, the answers, and Laura, please let us know once it comes in. Oh, great, excellent, it's in. Super, brilliant. Okay, so we have most people working on it. Only a few people haven't done anything about it yet. That's great, you're here. Working on it means you get more information from here. So this is excellent. Thank you, Laura and Michael. So just to quickly run through some of the interventions, and we in the interest of time, we picked one country, and we can obviously, Ghana, you would have more about Ghana because this Rainbow Consult is here to assist after the webinar with more specific requests that you might have. But here are some of the interventions from Nigeria, and it's very important for SMEs to know what these interventions are. So in terms of tax measures, the federal tax measures include things like extension on filing deadlines. I know the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Nigerian Stock Exchange also has similar extensions. At state level, only 2 states have introduced some kind of measures like the extensions also for 3 months. Most of the measures start from the 1st of March. And so the extensions are, for those periods. Some extensions or some measures with the tax authorities also include permission to file with unaudited accounts and file those audited accounts later on, unaudited financial statements. So you have subnational tax measures as well. Another interesting one is the central bank measures, and I highlighted some of these for you to see. So if you're an SME in Nigeria, these central bank measures would have knock-on effects on loans that you might have with commercial banks, because the central bank is giving facilities 1-year reduction, for instance, on interest rates. They are putting a moratorium on repayments of facilities that have been issued to banks, and so banks can translate or transfer these I'll call them benefits or interventions to their clients and customers. This is interesting. So there's this 129 million, almost $130 million credit facility to the entity, the Nigerian incentive-based risk-sharing system for agricultural lending. So basically, this is a microfinance bank that was established to support SMEs support SMEs, and in particular, those SMEs that are experiencing effects of COVID-19, which really we can say might be all SMEs in Nigeria. There are lots of questions about how these monies will be dispersed and who will get them. And one of the recommendations that might be taken would be, using or working with chambers of commerce and business membership associations and industry associations to verify and make sure that the right SMEs or there's no fraud and there's transparency in how these funds get dispersed. And that will bring us again to another very important point that Baaba will be talking about down the line. The extensions of loan facilities to companies in key sectors, which is great, from the central bank, which means better interest rates than from commercial banks. And so you're looking at pharmaceuticals, the healthcare sector, you have manufacturing and agriculture. Those are key sectors that have been identified for this loan facility. And then finally, this again takes me back to the first measure that the central bank has, which is this very specific collaboration or cooperation with deposit money banks that have given loans to businesses, especially small businesses and households. Central bank is going to be looking to work with banks on, deferring those loans, extending the loan terms, without adverse effect on your interest rates. So, governments are working in different ways. There are other things that are in the works. There's the emergency economic stimulus bill. As of last week, I'm not sure if it's been passed, but I know it's passed a few readings, and there's not too much kickback against it. But one of the measures here is, the tax rebates that companies might get. There is a, proposal to defer residential mortgage payments. For some of you, you have your employees contributing to a national housing scheme. And so that will be important for small businesses. There can be that deferment. There's waiver on import duties as well. And you may have seen, I just want to stress the importance of, tax rebates for companies that don't lay off employees from March 1st to December 31st. Doesn't say anything about, reducing pay and managing your budgets in different ways, but it's really about laying off specifically. So this is how governments are responding because of the significant impact of COVID-19 on the economies and on businesses, especially small businesses. And the IMF's publication recently about funds that are coming to countries across Africa to cushion the economic effect, stressed and emphasized that the priority for companies, for countries, member states, is to kick back this virus, is the health of people, health and well-being of people, which includes your employees. And then we can talk about, financial implications, the macroeconomic implications later, and that they'll be lenient or they'll, reach out to make sure that they can help countries cushion the economic impact, which translates to, the impact on businesses and SMEs. And those, that support would come through government interventions like this. Now, that also means that in responding and adapting, businesses now need to be thinking very carefully about what we can do right now to cut costs, but not cut corners. How can we make sure that we hold on to our business, but at the same time, we keep our customer loyalty, we continue to meet up with our ethical commitments, all of them which include openness, transparency, loyalty to customers and stakeholders and employees. How can we continue to do that in the face of the challenging times that we face? And that's where we want to start to talk about responding now, adapting and building resilience, which means doing business with integrity. So I'll hand over to Baaba now to take over and tell us how we should respond, adapt, and build resilience. Baaba, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lola. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for your presentation so far. So as Lola said, she's given us the global and regional outlook. And so we all know about the gloom and doom, that the gloom and doom, that COVID-19 has brought to us. But it's not all a sad story. The good news is that we can respond, adapt, and build resilience. And so in the coming slides, we'll be talking about how to respond and adapt first, and then we'll talk about how to build resilience in an ethical way while we wait out this pandemic. Take action while we wait is what we're going to be doing. And so Lola has already spoken about a few of these effects and the reality on SMEs. So I'll just go through very quickly. We know that there is a lockdown. There has been a lockdown in many places. Even if there's no lockdown, businesses are being asked to scale back on the number of employees that are coming, and most of us are working from home. And the challenge that this provides for us ethically is that we are relying on technology to manage our employees. And so we have issues of absenteeism, abuse of company resources, for example, even time and tangible resources. How are we sure that our employees are not sleeping or doing other things during working hours in this time? And also our businesses, all of us as business owners, are looking for answers and quick solutions. Coupled with that, there's economic insecurity contracts and several service level agreements, suspensions, layoffs, budget cuts, uncertainty about consumer behavior. And for our employees also, uncertainty about whether they'll keep their jobs. And that provides an ethical dilemma. And we find out that people will do things that they usually would not do because this insecurity has put them in a very tight spot. We move quickly to the supply chain disruptions, and we can talk about their shortages. And businesses and consumers can have unethical responses to these supply chain shortages by price gouging and also hoarding. And so these are all dilemmas that we are facing. This is the reality for us as SMEs. And Lola talked about the cash flow crunch that we are experiencing. And so we are relying more on cash transactions, and that's limiting our efficiency, and that's also increasing the risk of theft and misappropriation. Also because our controls that we may have had when we were physically going to work every day are probably not there now that people are working from home. And then, of course, we've talked about restriction in mobility, but we'll talk about how it has also led to supply chain problems, scarcity, production delays, and maybe now because there's restriction in mobility, the ethical problems are, do I pay a bribe to be able to get from one town to another if there's a lockdown, things like that. How do I clear my goods from the port? Do I pay bribes? Do I give incentives? These are all, next slide please. These are all the sorts of challenges that we are experiencing in our companies. And this is the reality for us. So this is the reality. But the truth is this, apart from COVID-19, before COVID-19, there was a cost of corruption. There was already a cost to corruption to our companies and our businesses and to us as a society, and that hasn't changed. And that still exists. And the Afrobarometer survey says that poorer Africans are twice likely to pay bribes than the richest Africans. So 36% of us, poor Africans, are twice likely to pay bribes than the richer Africans. And you will see in my next slide, you will see how interesting that is when we talk about small and medium companies and how they are more likely to pay bribes than larger companies. And so there's a trend here. The smaller and poorer you are, the more likely you are to pay bribes. And in Nigeria, about 1 billion of MSME support funds has been siphoned from state coffers between 2014 and 2018. About $1 billion in Nigeria. And you will find out that this exceeds Nigeria's capital expenditure on health and education combined in the period. And health and education are two big sectors. So that's very interesting. And in Ghana, Transparency International's local chapter says that we have lost close to $3 billion to corruption annually. Every year, we lose $3 billion to corruption. And this is the most heartbreaking of them all. The UNODC estimates that corruption accounts to 10 to 25% of public spending. 10 to 25% of public spending can be accounted to corruption. And in times of COVID-19, that's a death sentence. That's the difference between life and death. Next slide, please. So this is actually the slide that I was talking about, and it shows the propensity to engage in unethical behavior. And it contrasts small companies, medium companies, and large companies. And you will find that in 2014 in Nigeria, we asked companies the percentage of firms experiencing at least one bribe payment request. And the interesting thing is that you realize that the figure for small and medium companies is much larger than for that of large companies. So for companies that are experiencing at least one bribe payment request, for small companies it's 29.2%, medium companies it's 29.5%, but for large companies it's 17.5%. And the same percentage of firms identifying corruption as a major constraint, small companies is 42.7%, medium companies is 55.2%, and for large companies is 31.5%. And the trend continues. But I won't bother going on and on and on about these facts because you have them available to you in the document, in the resource, in the PDF that we'll be sharing. But a quick glance will show you that in all of these parameters that we've talked about in the various countries, small and medium companies have a greater incidence of bribery, corruption, and such related incidents than the large companies. So it shows us that we are more at risk. We are more at risk. And then we move to talking about the cost of corruption. But before we do that, we will have to have our next poll. Laura, if you could please help me. Yes. So this is our next poll. Have you experienced direct or indirect demand for bribes or unofficial payments during the COVID-19 lockdown or restrictions within legal limits? And so these are options. Have you experienced demands for bribes, whether direct or indirect, during this period to move around operations and logistics, to clear goods, to access government relief funds, to obtain healthcare services, or if you have received the demand and it's for another reason that has not been put in the poll, you can click other. So I invite you now to please join and click which applies to you on the poll that you have on your screens. And once that's done, I'm sure Laura will display the results and then we can move. So while we are voting and waiting for the results, we'll just talk about the impact of corruption on SMEs in normal times also. And in normal times, without COVID-19, there's a 10% increase in the cost of doing business. And we find that 12.8% loss to, we lose 12.8% of our revenue to internal fraud. And then, of course, there's the reduced incentive and capacity to innovate, create efficiencies, and move and improve quality. And then, of course, this is a very big one. There are losses to criminal fines, prison sentences, and liability for corrupt activity. And of course, if you are paying fines and going to prison, then there's poor local and international brand reputation. Your brand is not going to be associated with good things, and it's going to be known for being unethical rather than being ethical. And there's loss due to lost business opportunity and sanctions, and debarment by institutions like the World Bank and the AFDB. And that loses you a lot of business and also credibility. And of course, there's also stolen government intervention funds. So we have, as small businesses, we have so much less leverage to negotiate our way out of bribes and unethical practices compared to larger businesses without deliberate or consensuous organizational efforts. So this is the cost, that we have to make deliberate efforts to be able to mitigate these things. Oh, and we have our results for our web from the poll here. And an overwhelming amount of us, 63% of us, and it's not surprising because this is a lockdown period and period of restricted movement. We've had to pay, about 63% of us have had to pay bribes to move around for operations and logistics. 25% of us have had to pay or have had demands for bribes and unofficial payments to clear goods. Interestingly, none of us have had demands to access government relief funds. Some of us have had demands, 13% of us have had demands to obtain healthcare services, and 13% of us have also had demands for other things that have not been listed in this poll. But I find that very interesting, and I think we should, in the Q&A section, discuss whether we've not had the demand for unofficial payments for accessing relief funds because none of us have accessed the relief funds, or that there is no corruption in the process of accessing the relief funds. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So we've talked about all the risks that we have as small businesses, and we have explored the risks that our businesses face and all the losses that we face when in normal times. And we've also talked about the risks that we face during this COVID-19 time. And so now we are going to talk about how do we survive, because we've painted the picture. It's bad, but how do we survive? And so now we are going to talk about responding and adapting. and then we'll talk about also building resilience. And so we've talked about the problems that supply chains give us. And so we are saying that we need to create supply chain efficiencies. And that with the restriction of movement of goods and services across our borders, factory shutdowns and all these restrictions and export bans have caused major disruptions in our supply chain. And it has put constraints on us in acquiring raw materials for production and also machinery, food, and other important products. But the important thing for us to note here is that we have to start looking at alternative sources of products and raw materials within our region and within the places that we are. And some online tools also offer alternative buyer and supplier contracts that we can take advantage of. But I think with this supply chain efficiency, tomorrow in our panel discussion, we will have an even deeper conversation on that with one of our panelists. So I will not talk much about supply chain efficiency and what we can do. But all I would say is that we have to start exploring how to source our resources locally at this time. We also have to think about our price. And with price, we have to think about a way of adjusting our prices so that we survive in the long term. And that is it. We have to avoid setting a new lower price floor or passing cost on to the consumers, because this is a difficult time for all of us. And our consumers are also going through economic hardship, and they have a lot of choice, and they have the ability to prioritize stock, services, and pricing as appropriate to protect themselves. And so McKinsey and Company actually encourages that you set a price that will help you to last in the long term. And you also come up with innovative promotions and discounts that keeps up your demand. In this period, we are just trying to survive and keep up our demand. So come up with innovative promotions and discounts that keep up your demand and enable you to survive. The best pricing plan for now is the plan that will earn you long-term customer loyalty, and that will ensure that you will be alive after this pandemic. And another important thing, we have to show that we are human. We have to help our employees and we have to help our clients. How do we help our stakeholders? To earn employee and customer loyalty and to keep the business operating during and after this period, we should give reasonable assistance to our employees. And so that means that layoffs in this period should rather be seen as a last case scenario. And when we have nothing else to do and we have explored all other options, then we resort to layoffs. But in this time, we should also think about providing our employees who are in dire straits, if we are able, with accommodation and other things that they need to be able to survive this period. And apart from providing them with accommodation and not laying them off, in this time, this is the time to show that you are human. And so we know that most of our employees working from home have children who have also been brought home from school. And so this is the time to make accommodations when we are having meetings and children interrupt, because it's a fact of life. The children are home and they do not understand that daddy is in a meeting and cannot be interrupted now. And so these are all the sorts of things, the sorts of support. It's not just monetary, other kinds of support that we can give to our employees in this time. And while we are saying that we must support our employees and customers, for our customers, we can offer them improved terms of payments and other things that they may need to enable them to access our goods and services better. We also have to honor contractual obligations. We have to understand how to manage and honor our contractual obligations. And this is all about communication. And so our obligations to businesses and other entities, this is the time to have meetings with them and to find a workable plan, a plan that works for both parties or all parties, that will enable us all to honor our contractual obligations to organizations and individuals that we deal with. And lastly, we have to stay informed about government interventions. A lot of governments are putting a lot of stimulus packages in place for SMEs. And this is the time for us to leverage on collective action be plugged into to chambers of commerce, to associations of companies in your same industry. This is the time to be plugged into other companies and other SMEs so that you can be in the best position to access the government relief packages. So it's important for us to stay informed about government relief packages in this time. Next slide, please. And now we talk about building resilience. We talk about building resilience and what can we do in this time to build resilience. And an important thing that we'll be talking about is that a business without integrity is one that is blind to corruption and unethical practices in its operations perpetrated by the people or in the organization. So if you do not know about the unethical practices that your people are perpetrating in your organization, then you are a business without integrity. Then you're a business without integrity. And with that background, we're going to be talking about how can we build resilience. The first thing is knowledge. You have to know and understand your products and services in this critical time. Because once you know and understand your products and services, you can now think about how to adapt, to change your product and services, to adapt to meet the current situation. So if you have an import-dependent product, you need to start thinking about how to source locally or how to repurpose your resources. If you have a product for export, you need to start thinking about how will I plan for my limited capacity for export. So we'll talk about this more with our experts tomorrow. And this leads us straight into our next point about the opportunity. You have to know your value proposition. And you can only know that if you know your products. So once you know your products, what makes your product special? And in this also, for the opportunities, in this time, what is the opportunity that your product can take advantage of in this COVID-19 time? And so I'm sure this has happened in other places too. In Ghana, a lot of the restaurants that at first did not offer delivery services are now all of a sudden offering free delivery services because they know their products and they've realized that the opportunity for them here is to add logistical support and offer free delivery in these times. So people can just pick up a phone, make an order and get the food. So that's been a way that the restaurants are trying to keep alive in this period, because most people now will not go and sit in the restaurant, even if lockdown has been lifted. And so the thing that you can do is to take advantage of the lockdown opportunity and bring the food to the people in their homes. Finance. We have to also think about how we are going to restructure our finance. How are we accessing our finance? What are we doing in this time? And this also still brings us back to the government relief packages and the stimulus packages. It also brings us to the fact that you have to be aware that as part of the stimulus packages, most governments are giving extensions on tax filings and the like. And so we just have to be plugged in and know what is happening to be able to survive. And more importantly, our people, our employees. The huge thing here is the integrity of our employees. And we've talked already in the previous slides about how economic insecurity is giving our employees a larger reason to take part in unethical practices. Because maybe an employee who would not have paid a bribe for a contract will feel that if I don't pay this bribe for this contract now, the company will not survive. Or maybe they themselves are in such dire straits that they say, if I do not receive this bribe, I will not survive. So it is important for us to make sure that we have communicated with our employees and we have their buy-in about being true to our ethical standards as a business in these times. And saying that also means that we should have a position as a business ethically. And even drilling down deeper, we should have a position ethically in COVID-19 times that our people are aware of. Because it is impossible for a business to be ethical and to have integrity if the employees of the business do not have integrity. And in the coming slides, we'll talk about how to put checks and balances and processes and mechanisms in place to make our people more ethical, or to at least ensure that they are abiding by the company's rules. In the next slide. So next slide, please, Lola. And so we have kind of done a risk assessment for SMEs, for just general risk assessment for all SMEs in Africa. And we have categorized the risk that we see to SMEs in this period under 4 main categories. And that's labor mobility risk, financial risk, procurement risk, and access to government stimulus. And we will be talking more about these risks also tomorrow in our panel discussion. And in the panel discussion, we'll actually have practical examples about how the panelists have managed to mitigate these risks. But for labor mobility, there's the increased risk of absenteeism, there's the increased risk of the violation of conflicts of interest commitments, there's the risk that your employees will be abusing company resources, there's the risk that there'll be fraud and mismanagement of company funds due to preference for cash transactions, and there's just the risk of labor violations due to layoffs, pay cuts, etc. And we talked about how in this time where people are in dire straits, people who might not do certain things will be more prone to doing them just to keep mind and body together in this period. And for financial risks, because a lot of us are working from home, there are risks that are related to disruptions in our regular financial processes. For most of us, we have a whole system of approvals and back and forth before any financial transaction is made. And a lot of them are not even using physical cash. But now that we are working from home, there's a risk that there's a gap. There's probably a very big gap in your financial control system. And that can lead to mismanagement and misappropriation, and also misallocation of funds. Then most of us are working from home. So a big risk is the disrupted access to records or suspension of approval processes, resulting in poor, inaccurate record keeping. We are all small businesses, and it's so easy for an employee to call you and say, can you please send money for this now? We need to acquire this now. And because we are in lockdown, and we are in a situation where we cannot say, write a requisition, bring it to my office, let me sign off. You probably just send the money very quickly because work needs to go on. And most of us are trying to hang on to the little business that we have in this time. And so it's very easy for us to overlook a lot of our processes because of survival. And this is the reason why we need to have policies in place generally, but more importantly, in this time, we need to have policies in place for COVID-19 times. And so one of those policies, and I'm going to go a bit back for labor, is that most organizations, you need to have a working from home policy so that the organization as well as your employees have a clear idea of what their obligations are and what the obligations of the company are to them in this period. And so, for example, in Rainbow Consult, we have a working from home policy that clearly states, for example, that we are working from home. And so from between the hours of 9 and 5, we expect you to be available via phone call or email. So that when there's any work or communication, we'll be doing it via phone call or email. So we expect that you are near your phone or you're checking your email regularly for updates. And then we say that and then that's the obligation of the employee. But it also has something like the company is supposed to provide you with the tools that you need to be able to work from home successfully. So the company's duty is to provide you with data so that you can work from home comfortably, and also a laptop so you can work from home comfortably. So things like that. And it shows you deadlines. So we say, once you've received an email, you are obligated to respond to it within 30 minutes of it being sent, or there are sanctions for that. That kind of helps you put in place, it kind of helps you monitor your employees and their workflow. Because when you send someone an email and they don't respond within 30 minutes, you can follow up with a call or another email that has a sanction saying, why haven't you responded to this email in 30 minutes? and things like that. So that's an example of a policy that you should have, a work from home policy that Rainbow Consult is able to help you develop for your business to keep track of your employees. And so there's also a COVID-19 finance policy that talks about the system of the new system of approvals, given that we can't have our old system of approvals. That's just not feasible in this time. And then also, so we move on to procurement risk. And because of the disruptions in supply chain, there's a great risk for unethical behavior when sourcing goods and services for your company. So this is the time where it will be very easy for someone to pay facilitation fee or bribe to access scarce goods and services. I mean, this is the time where an employee will actually expect to be patted on the back because they were able to pay a bribe and maybe get this raw material that otherwise would have caused a great disruption in production. And this is also the time where some employees will source substandard goods due to scarcity and increased price of the original goods. It's also the time where we ourselves can make and supply substandard goods to satisfy supplier commitment or demand. And it's also a time where, because of the breakdown in our processes as an organization due to lockdown and restrictions, you can suspend your preferred vetted supplier arrangements due to the need for speed and the demand for products. And so it is important in this case also to have a policy that clearly lays out the processes that you go through for procurement. So the times are different. So the processes for procurement have changed. So it is better to have a clear document so that when there's a clear breach, there can be a clear sanction. That's the way forward. And then we talk about the risk associated with accessing government funds. And you know, all these stimulus packages that are available, the temptation to pay a bribe to be first in line or to even maybe see some of the money that the governments are promising us is very high. It's very high. And there's also the temptation to maybe pay a bribe for tax clearance certificates and the like, if maybe that is a requirement for accessing those schemes. But the thing is, if you're an ethical company, you should have all your tax clearance certificates and the like available anyway. And then there's also the big, excuse me, please, temptation to falsify or misrepresent your company, because we are all suffering and you might not fall into the category that is being given relief. So there might be the big temptation to falsify or misrepresent certain aspects of your business so that you can have access to the stimulus packages that are being, given and that are available to SMEs. But the thing is that once you have a code of ethics and you have things that you are doing and you know what and how you stand, what you stand for as a company, you will not fall prey to any of these to access government stimulus packages. Next slide, please. And the key here also is leveraging collective action. Once you know you have all of these risks, to access government funds, you leverage on collective action. And at this time, we have our third poll of the day. And Laura, yes, thank you so much. So our third poll of the day says, what are the major challenges or risks you have faced with managing employees due to lockdown and restrictions in movement? We talked about the challenges. And so the first option, assigning tasks, tracking performance and tasks, absenteeism of staff, diversion of company resources, and risk of internal fraud or other. So please choose which applies to you. What major challenges or risks have you faced with managing employees due to lockdown and restrictions in movement? Okay, once the results of that poll comes in, I'm sure that Laura will share with us. But in the meantime, we've almost come to the end of our webinar. We just have one short session and then we're done. And we are going to talk about how to plan for recovery with integrity. We've talked about all the risks that you are prone to. And now we're going to talk about how to plan for recovery with integrity as an SME. What do you do now? You know the risks. What do you do? And here we are. So for assigning tasks, 38% of us say we are facing those challenges. Tracking performance and tasks, that's 72%. That's a majority of us are facing problems tracking performance and tasks. 38% of us are having problems just tracking with absenteeism of our staff. 17% of us are having problems with diversion of company resources. 10% of us are having problems with the risk of internal fraud. And 14% of us have other challenges that we are facing. And this is also a very good indication of the fact that we were spot on when we were encouraging you to have a work from home policy, to have a COVID-19 procurement policy, and also a COVID-19 finance policy to kind of put structures in place. Once you have these structures in place, I dare say that these problems that you've been having will be reduced. Yes. So now I will hand over to Lola and she will join me as we talk about the last few things that we have to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Baaba. Just as Baaba was talking, I made a few notes about some of the points that we would be talking about tomorrow with SME business owners and managers that have experienced most of what was in the last poll and are adapting to it. Baaba talked about helping employees. When we talk about responding, how do you help employees, provide them with the resources? And one of our panelists tomorrow will be talking about how, they are a business that they're in the food industry, and prior to COVID-19, their deliveries were only 20% of, their entire. But during COVID-19, it's gone up to 90%. And this means that they've had to quickly ramp up other kinds of tools, like maybe bikes and vans to be able to, meet up with delivery, and providing, even as far as providing accommodation to employees close to the office to continue with the business. So the adapting to COVID-19 has taken different turns for different businesses, and it's helpful for you to hear from your fellow, small business owners about small and growing business owners about how they're coping. So I thought that was interesting. I also think, we have talked a lot about the challenges. We've shown you the risks, which now must be giving you some great ideas about how to respond, or even questions about how to respond. And that's what we are going to talk about next. But before we go into that, I want us to pause and take some questions. So we have some questions in the Q&A chat. Please drop more questions if you have them, if there are things you want us to address. If there are also questions you have for our panelists for tomorrow, you can put them in the Q&A chat. So we have 2 questions right now. I would let Laura sort of guide us to respond to those questions, and then we'll go on to the last part. And the last part would only last about 10 minutes. That's really where we talk about the tips, the resources available to you that you can use right now to take away and implement. And then we'll take more questions right after our next 10 minutes presentation. But before we go into that, let's take questions. Laura, do you want to cue us in on what the questions might be that we have now?
Sounds great. So the first comment that we got was relating to an earlier part of the presentation. And that commenter said that their organization had not accessed or attempted to access any relief funds.
Okay, and that's understandable because the government intervention, programs have just been announced within the last 2-3 weeks. and it takes a lot of time, I presume, and coordination to sort of determine how to disburse, what entity would be the right, entities to be part of the disbursement mechanism and process, how to screen the right people to receive it. So it's possible that all of that is still going through the works. Now, the interesting thing is, while that happens, what is important is there must be transparency and openness about all of that communication. And what is even more important is that, the business membership of representative organizations, the chambers of commerce, the manufacturers associations, the, small and mid-sized enterprises associations, the organs, the organized private sector groups that represent your businesses should be involved in that communication, in that conversation about how, the $130 million fund that the Central Bank of Nigeria has made available to SMEs. Your voice should be heard about how those monies should be made available, how those monies should be dispersed. Otherwise, we've seen that public funds, according to the UN ODC, 10 to 25% of them get stolen, because of corruption. The COVID relief funds that were made available for the Ebola crisis, after the audit, after the Ebola crisis, we found that a third of them weren't accounted for, And so while the government has not yet disbursed these funds, it's important for you to keep your eyes and ears glued to what the communication is about how those funds will be disbursed, and try to make sure that your voices are heard through collective action, through your chambers of commerce, and through the associations that you belong to. And you see that's also a very important control. That's a very important part of your corruption risk management, because if the process of this disbursement of the funds are not transparent, are not done in a way that accommodates all SMEs, to some extent, even SMEs that are in the informal sector, SMEs that may not be registered, should still be able to access these funds. So if, for instance, there is a rule that if you're not registered with the, registrars, the commission that registers businesses in your country, then you can't access it, or if you're not in a certain category of registration, those kinds of things you should be able to make your voice heard about through your chambers of commerce and your business membership organizations. Otherwise, it creates the risk that when you feel the pressure that you need the government interventions, then you could be promising a kickback to a government official who says, well, I can waive that document and give you access and put your name on the list. And then here you are doing what you don't subscribe to, which is giving a kickback or paying a bribe. So that's a very good point to note that, we haven't accessed the funds yet, or we haven't attempted to access the funds. It's possibly because there are no guidance yet, and we should be involved, businesses should be involved in the conversation about how those guidance for how the funds will be disbursed, should be made. In some countries, like in South Africa, some of that information is available and businesses are already accessing the funds. The Bureau of Statistics in South Africa published that survey we talked about, and 38% of companies said they are already accessing some of these intervention funds. So in some countries, the guidance is out there. In some other countries, it's still new and they're still working through the process. If you haven't attempted to access the funds, please do, because then you will have even better feedback for your chambers of commerce when they reach out to you with a survey to say, have you received, or have you been contacted, or have you accessed these funds? If you try to access the funds and you can give specific responses to those surveys, it helps your chambers of commerce, Lagos Chamber of Commerce, for instance, or another city chamber of commerce. It helps them respond better. So I'll take the second question. Or Baaba, if you have anything to add to this, please do.
No, I think you have it all. So we'll just move on to the next question. Yes.
Great.
Super.
So then the next question was talking about how some of the conversation was revolving around statistics of corruption that are a bit older. And they were asking if you could speak to any kind of new recent evaluations on fraud and corruption from the last year or so.
I'd be happy to. Should I take that, Baaba?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, I mean, so you'll see that some of the statistics we referred to, so like the Afrobarometer one, and some of them are in the last year and 2 years. It does take, 6 to 8 months to conduct some of these surveys, validate the data, go back, do focus groups to make sure that what you got from, the surveys that could be, collected through various instruments are accurate and all that. So it does take time to publish some of those and then to develop another one. So the Afrobarometer one is in the last 2 years. And you see that, a lot of issues around corruption, two things. One is it's very sensitive. So it's not the easiest thing for, people or companies to admit to. And so as CIPE, we've done very tailored, focused surveys in the last year. So in 2018, we had a corruption risk mapping survey done in Kenya with businesses in Kenya. You don't find so many corruption surveys done with businesses unless it's through an association and there are registered professionals in that association, like the one that we saw for the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And so, but we've done a few with businesses. We've done one in Kenya, we've done in Nigeria, and we've done in Sudan. And when you have those kinds of results, the question is about compliance, the capacity for businesses to prevent corruption. When you have questions about, specific questions about fraud and corruption, that the companies have been involved in, it's very sensitive. You don't get clear cut, accurate information. And that's why many of the surveys you see about corruption are about things around perception. There was a United Nations one that was about how many bribes have been paid. Also the Afrobarometer one. The enterprise surveys also of the World Bank is really about how often bribes get paid and the value and all that. But even that has become hard to collect because it's very sensitive. It's becoming more and more sensitive. And so in our network,
I was actually saying, I actually think that this, so sorry to come in, but when you mentioned the enterprise report from the World Bank, I think that's what I'm not too sure, but I'm pretty sure that's what the person asking the question was asking about. Because that the figures for Nigeria are from 2014 and and Ghana is 2013 and Ethiopia is 2015. So I think that's the specific that the person who asked the question was asking about. Yeah.
And we were going for the most recent data that's available. And this enterprise survey data by the World Bank has been collected for at least a decade plus. And it's becoming more complicated to ask these pressing, and the questions have become more targeted at, do you pay bribery and how often? And so it's becoming a bit of a challenge. However, what we've been doing at our network is learning how to do these surveys, with businesses through institutions that are trusted by the businesses, so that the businesses feel free to say honestly what their risks of bribery is, and then they know that the institutions will use this information to help them. And so in Kenya, we did this with the Kenya Private Sector Foundation, KEPSA, and in collaboration with our partner, Milestone Resources and Twanene. And what we learned was interesting about, the experience of bribery and corruption of businesses. We can make that report. Please let's make a note, Laura, to make that report available to everyone along with the PDF. And just one thing that came up there is, interestingly, absenteeism was a high risk for many businesses in Kenya. And so, now I can imagine whatever the percentage was then, I can imagine the percentage in terms of risk level would go up today. So we will make the 3 reports on corruption, more about, companies' capacity to prevent corruption. We'll make those available as part of the PDF, the one from Nigeria, Sudan, and KEPSA, and the Kenya one.
Great.
Okay, maybe we take 2 more questions and then go into the last part.
That sounds great, because we have 2 questions right now. So The first question was from somebody who asked, how do I, as an SME, mitigate the risk of labor mobility? The staff who set up my digital platform has just been poached by my less digital competitor.
Fantastic. Okay, let us take that when we get into the controls, when we get into the tips and controls.
Great. And the last question that we have right now was, in all of this, what do you reckon is the place of skill providers for small businesses? Their roles defined. Thank you.
Their roles defined. So this is, okay, this will be training and capacity building businesses. I believe that's what the question is focusing on. I'll let Baaba take that, because Baaba's, your firm is a, consulting firm. This is really your space. And, you've been adapting. And I will also tell you, please attend the panel discussion tomorrow, because we have 2 more firms in this industry too, with Baaba, who will talk more about this. But I'll let Baaba respond to this before we go on to the next slide.
Okay, I hope I'm understanding the question right, but from what I'm understanding, she's asking what are we doing? What can we do in this period, in this COVID-19 period, in terms of resilience, planning for now, and being able to have good business in recovery. So a lot of it is that, well, it's always been a digital world. And so for skills providers, it's finding a way to move your business online. So if it is a skill that you're providing, how can I provide this skill online? Is it through webinars? Is it through live training events? Is it through making videos on YouTube? If it's a practical skill, is it making step-by-step videos on YouTube, teaching people how to do it and going step by step and collecting that for a fee? So it's all about thinking about how to remain relevant. And for us in this time, a lot of us have our businesses revolving around face-to-face meetings and face-to-face trainings. This is the time for us to leverage all the technology available and all the digital resources available for us to take our businesses into the future. Because anyway, this is where the future was going. Remote working, virtual meetings, virtual trainings, virtual skills provision. But it seems like COVID-19 has just made it get there faster. So it's time for us to get in with the trend of the world and position our businesses for the future, for the world that we were going to get to anyway, inevitably. So it's thinking about how you can provide those skills online. And I hope I've been able to answer your question, please.
Yep. So we had a great session yesterday on communication for enterprises during this time. If we have the recording, I would suggest we also make that available, if it's okay to make it available, because there are great points also to the question that Baaba just excellently answered. Okay, so I'm happy to go on to the next slide, and just we have 5 minutes to go, and that will come back to the question that was asked about labor mobility and how to address situations where your employees can can be poached and will be poached during this time. Laura, if there are any more questions, we can come back to those if we have more time.
Great.
Excellent. So Baaba and I are not fans of crowded slides, right? But we had to put this here, and I will tell you, there's a much more detailed version of this in the PDF that you will take away. That's your roadmap for building resilience and implementing controls that would help you address these challenges that we see that you're experiencing. By the way, one of the things I was going to suggest is, if you can put in the Q&A, if you're one of those who noted other when we asked you about the challenges you're experiencing with employees and labor mobility, please put it in the question and answer, just as the question that we're going to answer as we look at this slide did, and we can come to that. In the PDF, you will find a more detailed slide. And the more detailed slide in the PDF has the controls and the tips specifically that you can consider in addressing things like labor mobility where your employees get poached, or all the other things around finance and procurements. It would have more detailed information about how to handle those. And it's a metrics like this so that you can look at, what kinds of resources here, what kinds of things should I be doing? What kind of solutions should I be thinking about? Is it a policy I need to make? Of course, when you make a policy or you change a process, it may not be a policy, it may be changing the process, then you have to communicate it to your staff. And for small businesses, I always have to remind you, when you say a policy document for a large business, sometimes it's about, that is like a procurement policy or an HR policy. It's about 30 pages, or a code of conduct, it's 20 pages. For a small business, it doesn't have to be that much. It just needs to be tailored to your needs. So your work from home policy could be 2 pages. If I dare say, I think the work from home policy for Rainbow is not more than 5 pages. It's straight to the point for what you need. And so the simpler, the better. So you have a policy or you have a change in process, you have to communicate it. So in terms of your solutions, you change your process, you communicate your process, I think we have a poll around here really, which is around, which is about this question. And please feel free to put up the poll. Laura, tell me to pause for people to respond if there's a poll here. But I'm mindful of the time, so I'll just quickly go through this. And we have the final thing here, which is accountability and providing leadership. So I'll pause for like a minute. I'm sorry, we will go over the time. We gave a few minutes, 8 minutes when we started for people to join. And so now that might explain why we might go over the time for 5 minutes. I'll try to keep it just about 5 minutes. So I'll pause for us to quickly answer the questions on this poll. And these questions relate to what we're talking about, and I'll come back to, to the solutions. So first question, do you have a work from home policy? Yes or no? And then the second question, do you have a health policy? Yes or no? Now, employees may feel, I have a cold, but I'll come to the office anyway. It's time to have a health policy. The World Health Organization has guidance about this that directs employees, if you feel ill, stay at home. This is who to contact if it's XYZ. If you have health insurance provisions, you're having to make tough decisions about that. Those kinds of things also you should consider in your health policy, revising your health policy. Second question, do you have a code of ethics? This you should have had even before the pandemic, right? Some people have a code of conduct, not a code of ethics. Some people call it other things like how we do business, our core values, who we are, so those kinds of things. Very important, do you have a crisis management plan? And this goes to the question that was asked about what happens when your employees get poached. You want to have a crisis management plan. As soon as this happens, you need to have a crisis management team that represents all employee levels, yourself at the business executive management level. It has everybody in it. And then you understand how you start to ask and understand how your consumer demand or consumer behavior will change, how your employee behavior will change, and start to make plans. The more you communicate with employees, the more it's likely that they'll trust you. During COVID-19 times, you want to keep stakeholder loyalty because it's easy to lose it. It's much more easy to lose it. People have less patience for business decisions that seem not to consider the dire straits that everybody is in, especially individuals. So do you have
Can I come in here?
Of course, please do.
About the question, just giving your answer to the question about the employees who are being poached. I think that also speaks to why we must document everything and document our policies and our procedures. Because unfortunately, our employees will not stay with us forever. And poaching is a fact of life. And so having that in mind, when you're setting up systems, you have to document everything so that you make sure that all the steps that were taken in maybe setting up your virtual system have been documented by the employee who did so that in their absence, you can quickly recruit someone from within the organization to take up that role or recruit someone else to come. And because the documentation is there, they can take up pretty quickly. And you will not have as terrible effects. It will not have as terrible effects as it could have had. So this is why it's important to have your policies and your procedures and also to document everything that goes on as a business so that no employee leaving will cripple your business. Yeah.
Fantastic point about continuity, business continuity and backup planning. If you have that, it reduces the chances that one employee, and I was just saying this when we had a team meeting, and I was saying what is important is one person should not have all that information in their head in an organization. You are an institution, right? You might be a small business with 2 or 3 people, but it's always helpful to keep accurate and proper records for times like this and in other times too. Fifth and then the sixth and final question. Have you adapted your finance and procurement policies or processes for these times? Yes, no, and I don't have any is there for you in case you don't have a finance or procurement policy. That's okay. That's why we are here. Because one of the things that Rainbow Consults and our partners in 13 other countries, at least the countries represented here, we have partners in those countries, South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria. We have partners in those countries just as competent as Rainbow Consult to assist you. So you can reach out to Rainbow or to the partners in your countries, and we'll share a list of all the contacts with the partners with you also. If you don't have a finance policy that's tailored to a small business like yours, they can help you adapt one. If you don't have a work from home policy, they can help you adapt one. Your work from home policy should fit your kind of business. If you're not a business that you have people working from home, but they are working on site somewhere or something, then it's helpful for you to speak with our compliance partners and tell them about your business, and then they can adjust the work from home policy for you, and even provide communication and training to your employees about how that work from home policy should operate, and set up the systems for you that you might need. Maybe your reporting system. I think one of the biggest challenges to you was tracking performance, so they can help you do that too. Finally, have you communicated with employees about your business's response to the COVID-19 crisis? And importantly, your ethical commitments during the crisis. Your ethical commitments are both to the community, to stakeholders, and to the business. So when an employee finds themselves in a place where they need to make, they're in an ethical dilemma, it's important for them to remember that the times are crazy, but we're not losing our values as an entity. And so it's important to communicate your plan and also communicate your commitments. I believe the poll would be done by now. So I'll go back to the slides. We can, okay. Yeah, we have very mixed results. Okay. Do you have a work from home policy? Excellent. We have quite a few that have a work from home policy. If you don't hesitate to reach out for help to develop one. Excellent. We have over 50% also have a health policy, but a big number still don't have one. Good. Now, code of ethics is a common thing with SMEs. We find ourselves not prioritizing ethics and integrity because we are thinking survival. And this can be a whole separate webinar about the mindset of an SME in the context of very established theories like the Maslow's theory on or Carlsberg theory on moral development. This is a different matter, a different topic. But the idea is sometimes we are very engrossed in the operations and generating revenues, and we forget to get our heads out of that and think about the SME's future. Think about surviving and thriving for the longer haul. And business integrity is critical for that for SMEs. And so not having a code of ethics is great that we have many yeses, because then you can have our partners help you with developing a simple, straight to the point code of ethics and additional policies like gift policies and all of that that would help you drive your business ethically. Crisis management plan, yes, a lot of us don't have crisis management plans. So that's another area where you can get a lot of help with. Okay, all right. Well, I'm sure you can all see the poll, so I'll leave it there for now so that you can scroll, you can have a look. And I'll just quickly wrap up. Baaba and I should wrap up in the next 4 minutes. And if there are more questions, feel free to stay on the call to listen to the questions. If not, feel free to drop off after the next 3 minutes so that we don't keep you for longer than 10 minutes past the time. So in terms of the risks that you experience with labor issues and employees, the risk of absenteeism and all the risks associated, here are some of the things that you can do with regards to policy and procedural upgrade, across these levels here. And there are more details about these. I wouldn't bore you, but you will see them in the PDF document that you will receive. You will see them in there about what you can do. Do you need to adapt your incentives and remuneration policy, for instance, when it comes to labor mobility for staff? You might want to do that. It's not a time to say you give a pay raise, no. But what other kinds of supports can you give, right? It's certainly not likely that you can give a pay raise. There was a lot of backlash with companies laying off this period, and it looked like those layoffs were not last resort. So are you reassuring and trying to also make sure that when you reassure employees that your last resort, absolute last resort, is a layoff? The last thing you want to do is lay off anyone. Are you reassuring them about that? Are you reassuring them about your commitment to them being healthy? And our excellent panelists will talk about that in more detail tomorrow with more practical examples. So I will just quickly go on to training, and I will stay here so that you can study the rest on your own and in your own time, and they will answer many of your questions. Do you have these policies? Are you training and communicating about these policies? It's one thing to have a CMT plan, a crisis management plan, or to have changed your processes to adjust to the times, but it's another thing to communicate them. Make sure you're communicating openly and honestly. You will see that when we talked about adapting or responding during these times, one of the things we mentioned there was the importance of you communicating price changes, you know, the need to change prices, whether you bring them down. Many companies are revising their prices down, some are revising their prices up. It's, you know, whatever you do, it's important to think through these things and make sure that you're making these decisions, you know, with a lot of consideration of stakeholders, and you're open about it, so that when you have a revision up or down, there's understanding about why, what rationale went into that. Are you adapting your HR package? So fantastic thing that Rainbow can help with here. Your timesheets, your reporting, all of these will help you with the biggest problem that we saw during the poll today, which is tracking performance and tasks. And then finally, this part, the ensuring accountability and providing leadership, is the part for business leaders on this call. If you're a business owner, you are in the strategic management, strategic planning, you know, group of the company, this part is especially for you. If you're representing your business owner, this is a critical part to make sure you share with the business owner, because this is where, you know, demonstrating accountability in the business leader themselves is critical to inspire confidence and inspire your employees to stick with you, to work with you, to survive these times. And providing leadership is, you know, is basically saying don't hide from the problem. Be open and honest about the problem. Listen to employees, listen to customers so that you can adapt. And so when you provide leadership, you would be asking questions like, well, you know, if you are a single parent, you are homeschooling, do you need to take some time off? Do you need to work half day? That also helps you strategically plan how your employees should work and how they can be remunerated or paid, you know, things like that. And then this is also where we talk about collective action. If your business is going to be eligible for some of the government relief packages, you need to now be saying, oh God, if I'm a business in Lagos or I'm a business in Ghana, am I a member of the Ghana Chamber of Commerce? Am I a member of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce? Oh, am I a member of KNCCI, the Kenyan Chamber of Commerce? What is the National Association of Small and Medium Enterprises in Nigeria? Do they have me on their payroll? Who can I speak with about that? Will they send you a survey so that you can give them feedback? This is the time to know what's happening around the policies that affect you. So there's more information in the PDF pack. You can see a slide right now with the solutions and resources available to you. But in the PDF, you have actual tips about, you know, what you need to do, and you can always reach out for further assistance. So I will keep quiet. I would allow Baaba, if you have anything to add, please do, and then we can take questions. I suggest that once Baaba is done with that contribution, if you want to drop off, please do. That's okay. We've enjoyed having you here. We will send you all of the resources I mentioned, the surveys, the PDF format of our presentation, and we will also send you a list of all our partners in the different countries so that you can reach out to them if you need help. Feel free to drop off after Baaba's contribution, but stay on it.
I think that we should move straight to the Q&A. So
super, good. Okay, well, we've enjoyed having you here. Please don't feel bad about leaving us now. Make sure you join us tomorrow at same time tomorrow with our panelists, and you'll hear more examples. You'll be able to ask way more questions, but now we will go straight to taking the questions. So Laura, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. So someone was asking about kind of managing their financial responsibilities to their company versus employee loyalty. And they asked if slashing salary by 50% will reduce employees' loyalty and kind of how to deal with that.
You want to take that, Baaba?
I think that I don't think there's a yes or no answer to this. I think that in this time, the most important thing is transparency with your employees. and talking to them, transparency and communication. Because I think that we all know the adverse effects that this coronavirus, COVID-19, has had on individuals, organizations, SMEs especially. And so I think that once you have frank conversations with your employee and you have other ways of showing them that you are humane, then you can have a discussion about reducing or slashing salaries. Because I think we all also as adults know that it might be inevitable that salaries are slashed or that layoffs happen, but I think it's how you go about it. And so that maybe your employees don't see you laying them off in this time, but then they can see that you bought a brand new car or, you know, things like that. If there's austerity measures, let's have the measures across the board. Let's have communication and have a conversation and maybe explain to them that I'm slashing salaries by 50% because I want to be able to still have you on board and I don't want to lay off or A, B, and C. So I think there's no yes and no answer, but the only thing is that have integrity yourself. And if you can afford not to slash salaries by 50%, then don't do it. So do it unless it's absolutely necessary. So as an SME owner, you also have to abide by your own code of ethics and you have to have integrity. And then the next thing is transparency and communication. And I think once you have those three, your employees will be loyal to you. So that's my contribution on that.
I have nothing to add to that except our panelists again will talk about this, about the things they've done. You can, you know, and I have nothing to add to what Baaba said because it's true. It just depends on how you go about it. You might find that you're slashing salaries by 50%, but you're offering other kinds of assistance that may not cost you money per se, that would go a long way to employees. I'm hearing about accommodation, for instance, for employees that may, you know, you have employees moving into your premises because it's closer to work for them or for other good reasons. I see a small company doing that, at least two small companies doing that, and that's interesting to me. But I can imagine in that case, if they slash salaries, but they're trying to keep the business going so that they continue to at least pay something, it's good. I'm also hearing about employees who are switching their health insurance packages to a different business, different insurance company, so that they can keep their customers, their employers switching their health insurance packages so that they can keep their employees covered in terms of health insurance because they will need that now. But unfortunately, the business is not able to continue to pay salaries as high as they were paying before, and so they're slashing salaries. But this is something that they've tried to do because they think health is critical, and they've communicated with employees. So it depends on how you do it. Nothing to add except those tips, and I suggest attend tomorrow so that you can ask more questions or hear more practical things from the panelists. Okay.
Great. So we just got a new question where somebody asked, is there some kind of support for SMEs in terms of templates to help build some policies and procedures during these periods? From CIPE and from Rainbow Consult.
Yes, and this is what we've been saying all the time. I think Lola is getting the slide. So Rainbow Consult is able to help you develop policies. We can help you develop a customized working from home policy. We're able to help you develop a COVID-19 procurement policy, a COVID-19 health policy, a COVID-19 finance policy, and actually any other policy that after a consultation with you and assessment of your business, any other policy that you may need in this time and beyond, we are able to, for a small fee, help you develop these customized policies for your business.
Excellent. I think that answers the or you're in Johannesburg, or you're in Kenya, somewhere, or you're in the other countries where we have partners, and we will make this list available to you. You can also reach out to the partners there who can also support you with these. Rainbow has ready-made templates that they can, after brief consultation with you, adapt, and our partners can also help you with that in the different countries where we are.
Lola, I think we did not even mention, but on the working from home policies, we are actually offering a free working from home webinar for SME owners. So that's one big thing that it's right there, but we forgot to mention. Rainbow Consult is offering a free working from home webinar for SME owners, and it is just about how to navigate working from home and tips on how to develop the policy. So that's for working from home. Rainbow is able to offer some free services. So
Baaba, I guess when you have a date for this and it's all set up, we will send that link out to everyone who attended today's webinar.
Yes. Okay. Because we'll be having a free working from home, developing your policy, communicating the policy, and monitoring the work from home for your employees. So we'll be having a free webinar on that. So
excellent, great. We had 76% of attendees had problems with managing the tasks and tracking performance. So I hope that we spend a lot of time on that. I look forward to attending that. Okay.
Yes, so definitely.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions, Laura?
We don't have any more questions at this time. We do have a comment for both of you, though. Somebody said, not a question, but a comment. I sincerely appreciate your facilitators and their facilitation and presentation skills. It made paying attention easy. The content and survey was fantastic. They were exposed to areas they never considered in light of the pandemic, and they valued it.
Oh, thank you so much. We have enjoyed spending time with you. Thank you.
Excellent. So with that, I think it's a wrap. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. On behalf of Baaba and I want to say thank you. I'm glad that this was helpful. I will make sure that you all get the materials. Baaba and I, Laura and Michael on the team will make sure you all get the materials. And we look forward to speaking with you again tomorrow with 5 excellent panelists. Please, feel free to send us questions that you might have for them to the email that you registered with, acafrica@cipe.org, and we can load those questions for them tomorrow. But I hope right now that you have a great afternoon and enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope that all the resources you receive would be useful to you and you would reach out if you have any questions. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Baaba. Thank you, Laura. And thank you, Michael, for all your help putting this together.
Yes, thank you so much, Laura and Michael. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Great.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.